Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. I'm so excited to have some amazing friends on today's episode. I have Ashley and Alyssa with me, who are the co-founders of Saltwater Doulas Perinatal Support Collective. With over a decade of combined experience in the perinatal field, and after 2 years of managing and growing a doula agency, they've created an amazing perinatal support collective located in Amesbury, Massachusetts. They offer all different types of prenatal and postpartum prep classes, such as childbirth education, prenatal lactation, spinning babies, CPR classes, pop-ups, and so much more. They are providing the community with an amazing space to collaborate while aiming to make a meaningful difference in so many local families' lives. I'm so excited. We have Ashley and Alyssa with me today, and we were just laughing about how there may be screaming children in the background, but that just makes it all the better, right? Well, thank you guys for joining me. And in typical us fashion, we're also on a time crunch, so we will just kind of like go through the topic here, and I think that's probably good because I feel like people enjoy a shorter podcast anyway. So do you guys want to give like a quick little like intro as to who you are, who Saltwater is, and whatnot, and then we'll kind of like jump into actual like prenatal education and all that jazz?
Sure. You want to start, Ashley?
Sure. So I'm Ashley. I'm a birth doula and a lactation counselor, and Saltwater Doulas is a doula agency, but we're also a perinatal support collective. So we have birth doulas, postpartum doulas, prenatal education. We've got free support groups, lactation support groups, really just so many things for pregnant parents and new parents. We do pop-ups at our space in Amesbury with other local mom-owned businesses.
I love it. I'm like, I feel like it's if you're looking for any type of perinatal class, Saltwater either has it or they will find a way to have
it. And I'm Alyssa. I am also a birth doula and a childbirth educator. Me and Ashley have been working together since 2020. And we recently decided to collaborate our businesses and kind of develop this new agency. So we started last year in 2023, and it's amazing. We love it.
Okay, wait, maybe this worked. I don't know if this is working. My microphone like unplugged mid-conversation, so hopefully that didn't like mess anything up. This is just what happens. This is just my life. Alyssa has been on the podcast before, so if anybody wants to listen back, she shared her birth and little bit postpartum story, and that was episode 48, so people can tune back on that one. That was fun. But yeah, today right. So today we're going to kind of just jump into prenatal education and talk a little bit about like what options are out there, what options people like should be looking into and may not know that exist, and kind of like why people should be taking them. So yeah, do you guys want to share a little bit about the like importance of prenatal education and kind of like what is the different options that are out there for prenatal education?
Yeah. So prenatal education, in my opinion, as a child educator, is one of the most important things you can invest in your pregnancy. Understanding like what could happen and what your options are, and knowing going into birth really is the best way to empower yourself through your experience. So we know as birth doulas and as parents, especially second-time parents, that you cannot plan your birth out. There's no planning of your birth. but knowing what your options are ahead of time and being able to have those like constructive conversations with your provider, whether it's prenatally or in the moment, and knowing what they're talking about really makes a difference in how you feel overall with your experience. Um, so we think it's really important to be able to find those resources and take those classes. And it isn't just childbirth education.
Right.
I think it's very important, but the breastfeeding education, the newborn education, the CPR classes, all of those things as a whole are really one of the best things you can invest in, really.
Yeah, there's so much, as everyone knows, so much information online. And over 78% of women use the internet for information. So if you can take a class with other local parents and know what you're getting is evidence-based and not wondering, like having to sort through things and figure out
Right.
on your own what's true and what's not. And I feel like everyone's on TikTok these days and like looking at reels, and it's just a great way to sit down and just know the information that you're getting is evidence-based, it's recent information, and you're gonna get to know like what all of your options are in birth and postpartum.
Absolutely. I tell my clients all the time that I'm like, you can go to Google, but like, please just let me be your Google. Like, send me your questions
Right.
because no sleep deprived person has the right of mind to be able to like actually weed through tons of articles online and be
Yeah.
able to understand it. And like, it's overwhelming, even for me sometimes, right? Like, I don't do the birth side of things. So I find myself messaging y'all all the time, being like, explain this to me because that's so much better than going online and being like, what the heck am I reading? And like, what's actually accurate. So I love that there are so many like childbirth education, prenatal education as a whole classes. And one of the ones, even like before I became a postpartum doula, I remember one of my friends was like, oh yeah, I'm pregnant. I'm going to take this like prenatal lactation course at the hospital. And my response quite literally was, why would you take a breastfeeding course before you're even lactating? I don't understand. So do you want to explain that to the 99% of people? That's my just guess of like how many people are listening to this going, why would you take a breastfeeding course before you have a baby?
Yeah. Well, if you can imagine being home like 2 days after you have your baby and trying to coordinate taking a class, like, can you imagine doing that and all the families that
Horrible.
you've worked with and like the space that they're in at that time? Um, and there's a lot to know just even about the first feeding or like what to expect prenatal, like when you're pregnant. Maybe people
Right.
are leaking or they want to collect colostrum or they want to get like supplies to make their life a little bit easier. It's nice having that information beforehand. The biggest drop off that we see in breastfeeding journeys are in the first 10 days home after you have a baby. So
Yep.
who wants to be trying to gather that information, and who's going to retain it when you're sleep deprived and you're recovering from birth? So
Right.
doing it prenatally is so helpful because not only are you educating yourself and your partner's getting educated to know like what to look for and how to help, but you're also you're setting yourself up with the contacts and the support prenatally as well. So when you do need it, if you do, which most people do, you already have that information and those resources at your fingertips, and you're not trying to find last minute someone who's available who can come see you and
Right.
answer questions. Like the class that I teach, we talk all about how your body's changing when you're pregnant and what to expect in the first feed, like what to expect from your baby right after birth, how to manage those first couple feeds, how to manage the first couple weeks, and how feeding, like feeding schedules and sleep schedules and all those
Yeah.
things that are all intertwined. Um, and I give lots of resources and handouts, things that have like high level information that they need to remember. And then they already have a contact and they already
Yeah.
have someone that they can quickly text or email, and I can respond and give information or get someone at their house. And so um, you get through the birth and you're trying to manage postpartum, and lactation is a huge part of it. So
Yeah.
having that information and that support immediately can really make a huge difference.
Oh, 100%. I think people don't realize that like the hospital's not going to teach you everything in the 48 hours or whatever it is that you're there for.
Right.
People are like, "Wait, I get to go home with this child? Like I'm responsible for this now?" Like the amount of clients that have said to me like I was walking out of the hospital and it felt illegal. It felt like I was kidnapping someone's child because you're like, "Oh, wait, I need to know these things," right? It's crazy.
And
Yeah.
I feel like so many people prenatally are like, we're just gonna go with the flow, which is fine. And we always like recommend people go with the flow. And people, this is why I think people are hesitant in creating a birth plan. That's why I
Right.
personally like to call it a support plan, because we know, like I mentioned earlier, like we're not planning our birth out, but you can plan how you want to be supported in different
Yeah.
situations. And when we have this information ahead of time, it helps us to make those different, to know what the different paths are and to know what your options are in those
Right.
different paths, rather than just going in blind. Just by educating yourself does not mean that you are planning a certain situation or a certain like goal out, but you're at least having that information there. So you're not going into Google, which is my arch nemesis.
Oh, it's so hard. So then the second thing that I think we all hear so much, right, is like, okay, we know these classes exist, like people should sign up for them. There's tons of options, right? Like there's not like a one size fits all, like take classes that you want to take, whatever. But then people are often like, well, I have a postpartum doula, I have a birth doula. Like I don't need to take those classes. They're just gonna like tell me what to do in the moment. Myth busted. Go for it.
Absolutely. Doulas definitely do not replace prenatal education. Our job is to support you in your choices, but you need to have that information going into it so that we can best support what your choice is, right? We can do as much educating as we can, but we are not going to have that dedicated time that we're all sitting down and answering your questions and educating you. And especially in labor, when you're in the throes of postpartum, like you don't want to be learning at that
No.
point. You want to have the information ahead of time. And as doulas, we're so happy to give you reminders and to help you kind of revisit that information. But it's definitely not easy to teach people what certain interventions are and things like that in the labor room and with a fresh newborn baby attached to
Yeah.
their boob.
And also, like, not all doulas are trained educators. Like,
Right.
there are ways that, everyone learns differently. So when you're getting it from someone who knows how to teach different learning styles, and knows how to present the information in easy to digest ways and ways that are not stressful or scary, um, that's going to be better than just relying on your doula, who is probably amazing, but might not have the same skill set that a certified childbirth educator does.
And another like
Absolutely.
important part of attending a class, especially like I personally believe the in-person classes are just a better way to form that like connection and community with the
Right.
other people in the class, but you're also getting their questions too, right? Like your doula might not think of a question to ask, even if you're taking like a pre-recorded childbirth class or you're doing like a one-on-one childbirth class, you might not think of questions and it might not be something that we normally talk about, but when you're
Mhm.
in that group setting, you're getting the questions answered from everybody else in the class too. So I would say at least once in every single one of the classes I teach, a question comes up that is not something that I typically discuss, and it's beneficial for everybody in the room to hear it too. So
Yeah.
getting a lot more of that like community support when you take classes.
I think that's so huge with being able to like have that information too, because right, like there are so many things that you don't think about, but then you hear them and you're like, oh yeah, that is like applicable to me. Or like probably then in labor, oh, you've had all of these educations, like you may, like you said, forget some of it that your doula can remind you, but then that might like spark a memory of a bunch of things that you've learned in class, which can be really helpful. Cause yeah, I mean, I've never been in labor, but I can only imagine that you are not focusing on like learning in that moment. You are not being like, teach me how to have this baby. You're like, just get it out.
Even if you are open to like learning in labor, you're not retaining the
No.
information and you don't have the time to like get the information and sit with it and decide what works best for your family, right? Like when people go in the moms groups and they're like, what hospital should I deliver at? My comment is always, you can't ask that question and get the best answer for your family. Like you need
Right.
to look at all of the options and find what's the best fit for your family. It's the same with Google. Like Google is biased when you're
Yep.
taking a good a good childbirth ed class or a good breastfeeding class, you're getting really evidence-based, unbiased information that you can then take and digest and figure out what parts of it work best for you. So
100%. So that kind of actually brings me to our other part of it that you were mentioning before. Hospitals, right? Hospitals have so many classes, and I know that people, once they kind of decide where they're delivering, if they're delivering at a hospital, they're normally like, oh, hey, come take like this class or that class. And most people will say, like, oh, I took one of those, so like I don't need to take other classes. Do you want to kind of give everybody a bit of information on like what the difference is between those hospital classes versus like other options that are out there? And if they haven't taken a hospital class, I know that probably every location's a little different, but like what topics do they go over during those that, even if you took a hospital class, you may want to take like this class or that class as an additional option from like
yeah,
a non-hospital location?
definitely. So the hospitals have limitations. Like everybody knows this. They often use like a pre-written curriculum that is bought off of like a medical website.
Right.
They're only giving you the information that they are allowed to give you, right? So oftentimes it's policies for the hospital and things that they want you to know, and they're leaving out a lot of the things that they might not think are important, but that are important. They also usually have like 25 to 30 couples in each class, so you're getting less of that community feel, and it's less time to ask questions and less of that like really personalized information. Um, there's definitely limitations to what they can tell you and what they can't tell you. I think that's the biggest thing when you take an
Yeah.
out of hospital class, whether it's with us or with any other um, independent provider, you're getting that like true, comprehensive, evidence-based, unbiased information. You're knowing what all of your options are. It's more than just like what to pack in your bag and
Right.
when to come to the hospital and what to expect from the nurses and
What
your
you're not allowed to
providers.
do.
Yeah, what you are not allowed to do. And more of that, like how you can be supported in those early stages of labor, or how you can be more supported in that first week home breastfeeding, or
Right.
when you should call your pediatrician if something's going on with baby. It's less liability for us to be
Right.
teaching and giving this information. Oftentimes the classes in the hospital are taught by nurses, so they are bringing some of their bias. We all have bias. It's not like a bad thing, but they're bringing some of that bias as a nurse of like, this is how I would love my patients to be in the labor
Right.
room. Whereas we're kind of coming from an outside perspective when we're teaching those classes. So
Absolutely. Now you mentioned that those classes are normally larger and that they are normally like partners going to these classes. I've heard of so many people being like, okay, like what's the purpose of like the partner being there at these types of classes? Like, should it just be like my partner, or should like my mom who might be in the room with me be there too? Or, should I be going by myself because I'm just learning and there's not much they can do? And like all of that. So like what are the positives and negatives, I guess, that you see of having people bringing like a support person with them to these classes? I guess that goes for birth classes, but also lactation too,
oh
because I
yeah,
think a
but
lot of
I
the time,
think
like
more
people
so.
don't think about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say more so for like the breast, like people know that like their partners need to know about like the stages of labor and how to
Right.
support them. And it is good to get that like hands-on support. But I feel like even more so with breastfeeding, where like people are like, oh, my partner doesn't have to come to this, right? Like
Right.
they're not breastfeeding.
Yeah, no, there one particular study that I talk about in my class is there is an actual statistic of partners. They studied two groups of families. One had a partner that did the prenatal breastfeeding education, and the other one did not. And the group that had the partner doing the prenatal education was like 80 something percent more likely to still be breastfeeding at the 6.
Wow.
It was I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's a significant
Yeah.
percentage. Having the partner there doing the education and understanding feeding cues and understanding like what their partner's body is going through
Right.
and how building a supply works. Like a lot of people come in the class and don't understand that breast milk is made on like a supply and demand sort of way. So if you have a partner that doesn't have any idea about that and they're confused why you have to feed all the time or why you need to pump and like when the baby gets a bottle or whatever, that can be, difficult to manage on your own without having that support. So definitely prenatal education on the lactating with partners. And obviously, if you have someone that's going to be in your birth room on the birth team, like if you know your mom's going to be there, having them be at the class to get the information is vital too, I think, because
Yeah.
they're like, they have to know what
Right.
your preferences are and what to expect. I mean, things change so much. And even when we're talking about like newborn care, my kids are 22 months apart, and they told me different ways to care for my younger daughter
Huh.
than when I had my first daughter. Even like the care of the umbilical cord was different between 22 months. So things change, especially if you're, 20 to 30 years old and, your parents are coming, it's probably going to look different and be different.
Right.
So having them involved is, yeah, so important.
Yeah. We always say a support person isn't required to take the classes, but it's definitely encouraged. And
Yeah.
I, for one, will allow like as many support people as you want to bring into the class to come. So
That's probably
yeah.
another great thing about a private place, right? Like you can bring
Yeah.
in more people, whereas I'm sure hospitals are like, you're one support person or you're two that will be in the room with you or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
like knowing, all of this information is also, I feel like, in a good way, probably helping anybody who's supporting you to like know what to expect
Yeah.
and also for like the birthing person to not have to make waves with their own family. Like I think about that all the time with when I'm with clients. I'm like, throw me under the bus. Tell them that your doula said blah blah
Yeah.
blah 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 because it's true information. But if you say like they told me to do this versus
Coming
like
from a
I'm
different
saying do
person.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of rolls into like partners want to be the best support that they can, but
Yeah,
this is especially for first time parents, like this is their first time too, and they just
right.
don't know how to support. So taking those prenatal education classes are not just teaching them like what to expect, but also teaching them how to best support their partner. So can't go
Absolutely.
wrong with that, right?
I love it. I love it. Now, there's so many classes on the market and so many things that people can be doing, and it can add up really quickly. What
Mhm.
is and are there any avenues of reimbursement for any of these types of classes? I know a lot of people do the hospital ones because it's
Yep.
like, included or free or whatever. But when it comes to like outside source classes, is there any type of reimbursement or things people should be looking for within their insurance companies or anything?
Yeah, the childbirth classes are often much or the all the prenatal classes are much cheaper at the hospital than if you go out privately, but that goes for like any provider, right? So if you go
Right.
to insurance-based chiropractor, you're going to get a 5-minute appointment and you're not going to get as much follow-up. Whereas if you're going out of network, you're going to pay a little bit more for more quality care,
Right.
right? So same thing kind of goes for private childbirth classes too. There is many insurance companies will reimburse for prenatal education for all of the classes for childbirth ed, for breastfeeding, for newborn care. They'll mostly cover all, if not most of the fee. You can use your flexible spending account if you have a FSA or I can never say it, HSA. It's
HSA,
if you
I
have any
know.
of those cards, they cover all prenatal support, so you can use those for them.
That's
Um,
great.
Oftentimes, like for us for example, we will bundle classes into your doula support. So we give a
Hmm.
discount for booking all of the classes and you kind of bundle them all together. We also offer gift cards too. So people are all about like the $1,200 Vista stroller and all of this expensive stuff. But
It's
I
crazy.
personally think like investing in your education, your support is going to be the best thing you can do. So we always encourage people to like add gift cards to their baby registry and put that towards prenatal support and education.
Oh, absolutely. Awesome. Now, your information will all be in the show notes below, but is there any like specific classes or services that you guys wanted to highlight that people seem to like really, I mean, people enjoy everything, but like anything that like you seem to find that people are like, wow, like they couldn't find this much around, or like I really enjoyed this class specifically, or that support specifically, or if not, just a quick overview of all the things that y'all do.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to speak for all of us, but I would say our spinning babies class is probably one of the most full classes
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah.
The spinning babies parent class teaches you all about like comfort in pregnancy, common discomforts and how you can alleviate them. And it really sets you up for a more successful and easier labor, which I don't think anyone is going to deny being more comfortable and having labor. So that class is really popular. We also have the childbirth education class. I'm a base trained childbirth educator. So I did the base training about 6 years ago now. So I've been teaching childbirth education for 6 years. I also recently became an evidence-based birth instructor because our whole entire team is really evidence-based and we really follow a lot of those evidence-based practices. So I thought that would be a good route for us. So I teach all of those 2 classes. Ashley teaches our breastfeeding class.
Yeah. So the breastfeeding class, I kind of talked about it already. It goes over what to expect when you're pregnant, those first feeding right after birth, and also how to navigate it in a hospital setting, because there's things that can come up in a hospital setting that might change how your breastfeeding relationship starts. So we talk about that. We talk about managing the first couple months, how your partner can be involved. I also do myth busting at the end because there's so many different things that we're unsure of that we hear online. If it's real, is it not?
Right.
Yeah. And then what else?
I'm biased on all the doula support too. Obviously that's not a class, but I do a lot of my private like clients, but the agency, I even did a year in review the last few years. And most of the clients that I take outside of my own private stuff is through y'all. So, I mean, they've got lots of different support too. And I love it because there are such great providers and we're all kind of spread out. So it makes it really nice that no matter where people are located and reaching out from, whether they want daytimes or night support, like 90% of the time we can find someone. And if we don't, y'all know so many people that you just end up sending you, like, people get support in one way or another, right?
Yeah. And even like if our central classes in Amesbury don't work for someone, we have someone out in Western Mass that we refer to. We have someone that's lower on the North Shore that we refer to, and they all have amazing prenatal education classes. So we're always happy to refer out to our partners too if you can't make it to our classes. But we do have doulas all over Madison. We love you.
Nice.
Always save our
awesome.
those clients. So yeah, and we have some new classes coming too. I just wanted to mention we have a cesarean prep class that we're going to be starting. We have a home birth specific childbirth class that we're going to be starting, a postpartum preparation class. So preparing like the birthing person for postpartum rather than like newborn care, right? We also have the newborn care class, but we want to focus on the birthing person a little bit more. And a grandparent class too, which I think will be.
Oh my goodness, that'll be a blast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have had a couple people that I know have, like, hospitals have mentioned, we have a virtual like grandparent prepared course, and I've had a couple grandparents that have taken them. So I love that you guys are going to be doing them.
Yeah. So my mom is a doula, and she just started she's also a CLC, and she just started doing a free breastfeeding group at our space. And now I'm like getting her back into the doula world. Get her on the grandparent class. So it'll be fun for teaching that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me and for sharing all the information. Like I said, their information will be in the show notes below, so check it out and head over to their website. But yeah, thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.